If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 10 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis due to a bird strike into Busch Stadium. In the area code 314, it will be a burning bush, as described in Exodus 3:14, on November 27, 2024. She will be replaced by Michelle Obama, and then Barack Obama will replace Michelle. I am predicting that former President Jimmy Carter will die on November 4th, and that his prophetic funeral, in which Trump will sit next to Obama, will be on November 8th. It is predicted that President Trump will die from a heart attack on January 1st, 2025. It is also predicted that Trump's heart attack will be triggered by a directed energy weapon that will target Trump through Bluetooth technology. The components inside the pointy thing that Trump took will facilitate this, and it is believed that when Barack Obama is sitting next to Trump at Jimmy Carter's funeral, Obama will obtain Trump's Bluetooth MAC address, which will be used to target Trump with a directed energy weapon. I am predicting that dirty bombs will explode in Manhattan, New York City, and there will be a large-scale evacuation on December 16th. I am predicting that Israel will bomb Iran on December 17th. Israel will nuke and completely destroy Damascus, Syria on December 26th, 2024. I am predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on November 8th, 2024. It is predicted that after Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash, Joe Biden will appoint Michelle Obama as his vice president. On December 17th, the Democrat Party will use their electoral votes to make Michelle Obama the president-elect. It is predicted that on either December 22nd or 25th, Joe Biden will suffer a stroke. It is predicted that on December 26, 2024, Joe Biden will step down and Vice President Michelle Obama will become the 47th president. It is predicted that on December 26th, Michelle Obama will appoint Barack Obama as the 51st vice president. On January 12, 2025, Michelle Obama will step down and Barack Obama will become the 48th president. His public inauguration ceremony will be on January 20th, 2025. It is predicted that on April 20th, 2025, there will be an outbreak of monkeypox or Marburg disease or both. April 20th will be a symbolic beginning to a new pandemic. June 8th, 2025, the true Feast of Pentecost in the calendar that watches for new moons, will be the day of the resurrection rapture event. It is predicted that on June 9th, the day after the rapture, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to the fifth trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens, and it is possible that June 9th will be the day Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. At some point, there will be a massive Mary apparition that will deceive the masses, because all Mary apparitions in history have been demons pretending to be Mary. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. June 9th will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. It is predicted that on August 6th, 2025, the historic barge that has been stuck on the rocks of the Niagara River for over 100 years will finally break free and crash over Niagara Falls. The reason for this is that Niagara Falls is Noah's flood symbolism, and the barge was involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls, symbolic of Noah's Ark. Niagara in the native language means straight, narrow way, and Niagara's Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the CN Tower in downtown Toronto, because Toronto and its tower are symbolic of the Tower of Babel. In a game of horseshoes, the object is to aim the horseshoe and throw it at the metal stick, which is why the Horseshoe Falls is perfectly aimed at the metal stick that is the CN Tower. God is communicating that as testament for those who will live in the 1,000 years of Christ's reign on earth, the geography of North America will, as a result of a massive earthquake, be divided by a body of water from the Great Lakes to the Mississippi Delta. This destruction will be judgment on America and Canada for attempting to divide God's land, Israel. When this happens, the water in the Great Lakes will spill out over southern Ontario and Toronto. I am predicting that a solar flare will erupt on the surface of the sun and send a coronal mass ejection that will hit Earth on August 13th, 2025. Which will knock out America's power grid and will lead to food shortages. The hit of the coronal mass ejection, predicted for August 13th, that will knock out the power grid will also knock many planes out of the sky. I am predicting that on August 23rd, 2025, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth, which will trigger the eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the east coast. The asteroid will also trigger a mega landslide on Hawaii Island that will trigger a mega tsunami that will hit the west coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be on the Day of Atonement, October 1st, 2025. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived, and more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. If you have already watched this introductory information regarding this explanation for October 30th and Paul Simon, you can skip ahead to the 43-minute mark. All right, welcome. This brief introduction here, the purpose of this diagram here is to explain how October 30th, 2024 will be a step. This is being recorded on October 25th. October 30th will be a step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date of Paul Simon's death. The singer-songwriter Paul Simon is predicted to die on November 8th. And October 30th is an important, extremely important step along the way. I will explain what I mean. The playoffs, or rather the World Series between the New York Yankees and Los Angeles Dodgers will begin tonight. It was predicted before the playoffs that these two teams would be in the World Series. The purpose of this prediction, or rather video, is to explain how October 30th was known ahead of time to be pointed to by God as being related to the trail of signs leading to the predicted death of singer-songwriter Paul Simon. There are a number of videos that are on this channel that are predicting this date, October 30th, explaining all of the evidence that God used to point ahead of time to October 30th, which is overwhelming, regarding the death of Paul Simon. It was learned last night that it is, or will be, a step in the trail of signs. All of the analysis is 100% correct. I guarantee it. There will be a prophetic sign on October 30th that will be relevant to Paul Simon. And I am more than confident that it will be a baseball sign. That is because, and it will be a New York Yankees sign, and that is because Paul Simon is known to be an avid New York Yankees baseball fan. But more than that, God has used Paul Simon in New York Yankees baseball signs. For example, this date right here, the opening day of the 1999 season, when Paul Simon sang before the game began in center field of Yankee Stadium, Mrs. Robinson. That is because one of the lyrics in Mrs. Robinson is about Joe DiMaggio, who had just died prior to the opening of the season. Okay, and Paul Simon is now predicted to die on November 8th, which will be exactly 1,335 weeks after this date. This is extremely prophetic. This is it's a period of time that is 1,335 days that is at the end of the last chapter of the book of Daniel that regards the end and the return of Lord Jesus Christ, the end of the age. Okay? And that's what we're talking about. The timing of Paul Simon's death is a major prophetic sign, or will be, because he is symbolism for the brief period of silence that John heard in heaven that preceded the judgments of destruction. Paul Simon's first big hit that launched his career was Sound of Silence. In Revelation chapter 8:1, the sound of silence was heard before the judgment destruction, and that's why Paul Simon will die on the date E11:8, which hints at Revelation 8:1. Furthermore, this date outside of the U.S. is written as 8:11. And also, God used the dates 8:10 and 8:11, August 10th and 11th this year, for precisely the same reason, as a step in the trail of science to this date, the date it's predicted that Paul Simon will die. Okay, now I want to make this video as brief as possible because I just want to make this video an explanation for how October 30th is a step in the trail to November 8th. Again, I'm going to place this introduction at the beginning of videos that will be talking about October 30th. Okay, and the analysis is 100% correct. And what you need to know is this is how it works. The skeptic will say, oh, you just, pick a bunch of dates and you're finally going to get right sooner or later. That's ridiculous, first of all. Paul Simon is only 83. It could be another 10 years before he dies. And second of all, it's not every date, as you can see, And furthermore, that when the prediction comes to pass, it will prove what I'm saying. And the reasons for how I know ahead of time will prove it. But also, I'm also predicting that Jimmy Carter will die 4 days before the death of Paul Simon. And to get the deaths of these two men right, that's beyond anything comprehensible, really. Okay? And Jimmy Carter will die in the fourth state, which is why the 4 days. One reason. We want to keep this brief, okay? It's also 2 + 2 days. He has 22 grandchildren. He is symbolism for Methuselah in the Bible, who was the grandfather of Noah. Methuselah died at the timing of the flood beginning, the beginning of the judgment, and the name Methuselah means when he dies, destruction. Both of these men are symbolic of the timing of the beginning of judgment, destruction of America. Following the sound of silence in Revelation 8:1 and the rest of the chapter of chapter 8 begins the 7 trumpet judgments, which is why Paul Simon's last album released was 7 Psalms, and it's exactly 77 weeks before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die. The release of 7 Psalms is released 77 weeks exactly to the date Paul Simon is predicted to die, and his death will symbolize the sound of silence that will be followed by the 7 trumpet judgments, hence the name 7 Psalms. And by the way, he was instructed in a dream to make 7 Psalms. He was told the name of it and everything, as he explains. This date of Paul Simon's death will be exactly 7 months after this 7 weeks connection to the date of the rapture on Pentecost in the true calendar that watches for new moons. This will be symbolic of Bridge Over Troubled Water, the rapture. His big song, Bridge Over Troubled Water, is symbolic of the rapture. In the Bible, the Israelites took the promised land, which is symbolic of taking heaven, the promised land, after a symbolic 3 sets of 7, and furthermore, the 3 sets of 7 was really a 7 and a 7 and a 7. I mean, a 7 and a 7 times 7, or a 7 and a 7, 7, which is exactly what's displayed here, illustrated through God's signs. Okay. The album 7 Psalms was released when Paul Simon was 81 years old, which is further confirmation that this 7 Psalms album hints at the 7 trumpet judgments following Revelation 8:1 that describes the brief period of silence that was observed in heaven, which is again why the song that launched Paul Simon's career is Sound of Silence. And so here we have the timing of Paul Simon's death and Jimmy Carter's death communicating from God the timing of the beginning of the judgment destruction of specifically America, because God is primarily focused on America. By the way, that's why two of Paul Simon's big hits were the songs America and American Tune, the latter of which Paul Simon sang at Jimmy Carter's pre-inaugural ball. And again, in God's Signs, which is explained more in the Carter videos, Jimmy Carter is symbolism for Methuselah. Methuselah in the Bible died at the timing of the flood judgment, and the name Methuselah means when he dies, destruction. Jimmy Carter will die on this 11-4 date, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, and therefore hints at the 44th president. Furthermore, it will be the 4 times 4th anniversary of the election of the 44th president. And it will also be the prophetic anniversary of the beginning of the 444-day Iran hostage crisis, which was the last 444 days of Jimmy Carter's presidency. Jimmy Carter will also die in the 4th state, and this is why 4 days from the death of Methuselah, Jimmy Carter, which means when he dies, destruction, will be the death of Paul Simon, who will point to the sound of silence that directly precedes the 7 trumpet judgments. This is what this is. This period of sound of silence, this symbolism, is this 11 plus 8 days. From the date that Paul Simon is predicted to die, 11-8, it is 11 plus 8 days to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium as she is homeward bound to her mansion in Los Angeles the day before Thanksgiving. And through her death will be the rise of the Antichrist through her replacement. The 44th president will ultimately become the president again because of her death. Okay, and so this is astounding because this 11 plus 8 days hints at Revelation 8:1. From the death of the singer who sang Sound of Silence, which points to Revelation 8:1 and the sound of silence in heaven, it is 11 plus 8 days to the beginning of the destruction. This is exactly what God will be communicating with the death of Paul Simon. This brief period of sound of silence before the judgment destruction begins, which will begin with the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. 7 Psalms was released 530 days, 53. The reciprocal of it is 0.0188, which is the number God frequently uses, 188, to hint at H188, the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Bible Concordance, which is the word that means woe, exclamation mark, used in the context of extreme judgment from God. This connects to this date here, which is the predicted date of the prophetic expected, predicted in advance sign involving the New York Yankees player Aaron Judge, as in 188 used in the context of judgment. His number is 99, and in the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. That's why prophetically his name is Judge. All right. This will all be pointing to, as explained in the must-watch video I titled, Harris will crash into ballpark. Her plane will crash into a baseball stadium on November 27th. Simon will die on November 8th equals Obama's first pitch. Okay, in Bible prophecy, or rather in God's signs, pitchers on the pitching mound are symbolic of the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. Obama wore jersey number 5 in this prophetic first pitch that he threw, which I explain in this video. All right? Paul Simon is associated with the number 5 in God's signs. There's so many examples. His name, Paul Simon, is equal to 500 in Hebrew gematria, and the Antichrist's word in Greek is the 500th word in the concordance, mentioned 5 times. Paul Simon released this 7 Psalms album exactly 500 months after the prophetic reunion concert in Central Park that attracted 500,000 people. With Art Garfunkel, he made 5 albums, the 5th of which won 5 Grammys. Paul Simon is mansion symbolism. He sings about the mansion in Graceland, which sits on 14 acres, which is the 5th semi-prime number. And ultimately, this points to the White House mansion that is on 5 acres. Paul Simon sang Graceland in the White House mansion on the date 410, which is at 14, the 5th semi-prime number. And on, as I explained in other videos. And that's why this date that is related to Paul Simon is a game 5. And it is 5 days before the predicted death of Jimmy Carter. Paul Simon sang at Jimmy Carter's inauguration ball. Okay? This date is exactly 5 weeks after this Paul Simon sign, which was expected in advance, explained in other videos, the indictment of the mayor of New York. And that was the day after Paul Simon gave a private concert in New York City, a rare thing for him to do at the age of 82. Okay, and on. Okay. Ultimately, this is leading to 5th trumpet day, the day after the rapture, June 9th, which will be when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm, and there will be a symbolic beginning to a mass demonic possession, which will be facilitated by 5G frequencies. Music is frequencies. A phrase in the Bible says that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. Frequencies are air. Frequencies are in the air. They travel through the air. Music, 5G frequencies, will trigger the components that are inside people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, the pointy thing, which will then trigger delta brain waves and mass demonic possession, which is symbolized, or rather the movie The Shining is about demonic possession, and the first lyric of Paul Simon's song Graceland is the Mississippi Delta, as in delta brain waves, was shining like a national guitar, and Paul Simon dated Shelley Duvall and is widely known to have broken up with her at the airport, as in portals through which demons will cross over into the earthly realm, before she left for the UK to film the movie The Shining, and on, as I explained in other videos. So that's the relevance of the number 5, okay? Paul Simon is predicted to die on the day of the prophetic funeral of Jimmy Carter, and as I explained in other videos, Barack Obama will be sitting next to Trump in the pew, lined up, and Barack Obama will obtain Trump's Bluetooth MAC address that people have because Trump took the thing, and people who have taken the thing, the components inside the thing that are in the people, engender a Bluetooth MAC address. This will be used to Trump's Bluetooth MAC address will be used to target Trump with a directed energy weapon. And it's 54 days because of this 5 and 4 days connection, but also the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which God has used and demonstrated in his signs to be symbolic of oppressive minority laws. And the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment, as in the first black president, were not paid the equivalent amount the white northern soldiers were paid. And this was official policy from Washington, D.C., and it was $13 because 13 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist because it is described in the 13th chapter of the Bible, but also the number 13 in the Bible is symbolic of the Antichrist. And anyway, the Antichrist will use digital programmable currencies, which is why the amount of pay was the story of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first Civil War black regiment, and the pay that they weren't received, and that's why digital programmable currency by the Antichrist and the Antichrist system will be used to program the currency to restrict the buying and selling of food that will be rationed to only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. I'm trying to do this quickly, okay? This was a prophetic baseball sign. Otani, this unprecedented player who's from Japan, God is using Japan for Japanese animation symbolism because the genre of film is obsessed with spiritual possession, and we are talking about mass demonic possession, the culture with their silly, nonsensical characters are symbolic of demons. It's rooted in their pagan spiritualist religion. And anyway, this was the day that Otani, this unprecedented player from Japan, playing for the Los Angeles Angels, as in fallen angels, Los Angeles in God's sign, since it fallen angels. He was the first player to ever hit 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in the season. And this is exactly 50 days to November 8th. Okay, but it is also connected. The Trail of Signs connects this date to October 30th. And the point that I'm going at here is that because, okay, so he also hit 51 home runs and 51 stolen bases in this day, and 5 + 1 days gets us to this date, which is then exactly 5 weeks to this date, this Game 5 sign that we are expecting. Okay? And so, in other words, this sign connects to October 30th, and what I am doing is, as in this video, explaining that October 30th is a step. And you need to watch the rest of this video because this is how it works. If God were to, okay, here is the thing. If God were to just tap a person on the shoulder and say, tell the world that such and such is going to happen on such and such date, it would provide nothing for us. It is through the interconnected signs of it is through these connections, through the prophetic signs. And by the way, none of the prophetic signs can be properly, fully understood without their context and connections with the other prophetic signs, which is only being explained on this channel. And it is through these connected trails of signs that God is able to tell stories and reveal extremely important knowledge and information that everyone needs to know. That's why when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that every minute of every video on this channel must be watched. That is the point. Now, I'm just going to finish this up here, explaining how October 30th was a step, the date that this video is being posted proves that I am producing this video ahead of time. I just slipped there because I take these things so for granted in my mind that I use the past tense, okay? Now, this date, let's see, what else should we get at here? Now, I'm predicting that on this date, something will happen regarding Aaron Judge, and it will point to the World Series in 1977, which is explained in the Obama first pitch video that I just mentioned. Now, the thing too, though, is that this date is exactly 99 weeks after this Aaron Judge sign, which, by the way, was expected in advance. Well, rather, I expected a sign related to the coming prediction of the dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan on this date. And then the player for New York City, number 99, Aaron Judge, signed his prophetic 9-year contract for $360 million. Now, this was known ahead of time. One reason being is that it was exactly 9 times 9 years after the bombings in Pearl Harbor. Okay? So that's why 9 times 9 years later, we get number 99, 9-year contract. Also 81, which is 9 times 9, is a 9/11 number because 9 divided by 11 is 0.8181 into infinity, and the flight that hit the first tower had 81 passengers. 360 million hints at 3 6s, and 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And also 36 is 6 times 6 and 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36 is a triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number of the 36 row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way to 36 equals 666. And this is then followed with 36 days, but this connection is 60 plus 0.00 plus 60.00 plus 60.00% of a year. Okay. And so that gets us to this date in which it is predicted that Aaron Judge, number 99, will give us a prophetic sign, which will be very prophetic, but the more to this is explained in the first pitch video, okay? That explains much more regarding what's going on here. This is just an introduction video. Now, this date, by the way, is also exactly 19,000 days after the day that Jackie Robinson died, and this is a World Series that will be pointing to this rivalry between the New York Yankees and Los Angeles Dodgers, which included Jackie Robinson. But this is relevant because of Paul Simon's song, Mrs. Robinson. As I mentioned here, he sang in the baseball stadium in Yankee Stadium, but also Michelle Robinson, which is the prophetic reason for the song, Mrs. Robinson by Paul Simon, who God is using for prophetic signs, because Michelle Robinson will appoint Barack Obama as her vice president, and then she will step down. This will all be after Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium. Okay, so, and he wore 42, the number that symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Okay, and let's see, anything else here? We got 45 days to the day of Paul Simon's concert in New York City. This 1,305 number is about the number 45 because it follows the 1,290 number, a difference of 45 days in that prophecy. And also 45 is symbolic of the end, as is this number. 45, the reciprocal of it is 0.02222 into infinity, and which hints at the second coming. But also 0.022 hints at the mark of the Antichrist, because the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22 in the book of Ezekiel chapter 9, and the 45 is the ninth triangular number. In Ezekiel chapter 9, the mark of the Antichrist would have been a Tav letter, the last and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. One last thing here, too, is that this date here, the day that Paul Simon sang in New York City, was exactly 32,200 days after Joe DiMaggio crashed into player number 4, Goose Goslin. This gives us a number 4 and 5 because Joe DiMaggio wore number 5. And that is ultimately hinting at this connection here, which gets us this 5 weeks connection to this date, and then 5 days to this date, and then so this is 45 right here, there's a 45 right here, this ends at 45, but also Joe DiMaggio gives us a 5, okay, and this is game 5, and then 5 days, okay, and it's also 5 days after this prophetic baseball sign right here. Okay, now the reason why this is prophetic is because they collided in center field. Paul Simon sang in center field, okay, and this caused Joe DiMaggio to be knocked unconscious, and that's why this is famous. Okay, but it was with Goose Goslin, another Hall of Famer, and Goose hints at a bird, and Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium in center field after a bird strike. The reason why 32,200 days is because Joe DiMaggio is associated with Marilyn Monroe, and Marilyn Monroe is known for having died at a young age. And she is known for her 2 movies in which the theme is immortality. The first lie told at the beginning of the age is that Eve told by the serpent in the garden that she surely shall not die, which is symbolized by Genesis 3:22, hence the 32,200 days exact connection. Okay, because all of this is leading to the coming lie at the end of the age, which will be the same lie as the lie at the beginning of the age in Genesis 3:22, which is that the promise of immortality without God, promised by the coming demons pretending to be aliens. Okay, and so we'll just leave it at that, I believe. Now, Paul Simon is predicted to die on 11/8, which is 11 plus 8 days before the predicted death of Kamala Harris in a baseball stadium, which will be symbolized by homeward bound. She will be homeward bound to her $5 million mansion next to the I-5, and Paul Simon, who is associated with the number 5, had a big hit, Homeward Bound, okay? And that's amazing. But it is also 19 days, and ultimately this points to the 1919 Black Sox, hence the first pitch that Obama threw for the Chicago White Sox when in the year in 2005, when they won the World Series for the first time since 1919. But also this 19,000 days in turn connects with 9 days and then 19 days to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, and then she will be replaced by Mrs. Michelle Robinson, hence Mrs. Robinson, about Joe DiMaggio, who was number 5 and who crashed in center field with Goose Goslin. Okay, so I think you get the idea here. October 30th is a step in the trail of signs. Now, Make sure that you watch the rest of this video. As I said, this is just an introduction, and as I explained, the reason for all of this and the reason why October 30th will be a step in the trail of signs is so that you can learn all of the stories and therefore thereby the information and extremely important knowledge that God wants everyone to know. This is the purpose of all of this elaborate matrix of signs. It is for him to tell these stories that are only being told on this channel. Make sure you watch the rest of this video. All right, to emphasize once more, this video was produced prior to October 30th. Even what I am saying is prior to October 30th. And it is known now that October 30th will not be the day that Paul Simon will die, but instead will be an important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date of Paul Simon's death. So do not be confused when you are watching the rest of this video when there is mention of connections to October 30th, implying that Paul Simon will die on October 30th. You now know how it works, okay? And so don't be confused in the rest of this video when we talk about October 30th in regards to the death of Paul Simon. It is a step, and all of the analysis for October 30th is 100% correct. That will be proven when the prediction comes to pass on November 8th. Okay, a couple other things that I forgot here. This Paul Simon related sign, the indictment of the mayor of New York, which ended up with the raid of the Gracie Mansion, which is a Graceland Mansion, and Paul Simon and all that. This is 44 days. We're ultimately talking about the rise of the 44th president through the plane crash. And 44 days is also 2 times 22 days. And through the 9/11 events, God pointed to George Washington, who was born on the date 2/22, which is why, for example, the World Health Organization officially declared the CVD disease begins with a pan, ends with a demic, exactly 222 months after 9/11 on March 11th, 2020. And another thing I forgot, if there is a Game 7, it will be 6 days, which is 2 times 3 days, and Barack Obama, the basketball president, wore jersey number 23 in high school. It'll be that Paul Simon will die 6 days later if there is a Game 7. And that in turn will be exactly 6 weeks after this prophetic Dodgers sign in Dodger Stadium, and this, if there is a Game 7, will be in Dodger Stadium. And this was the day that Trump dodged another debate because that was after the other debate, which was rigged. And there was a prophetic fire right beside Dodger Stadium that was seen from the seats in the stadium during the game, and on, as I explained in another video. But it was at an old courthouse, which is symbolic of the coming shoplifted referendum and all of that, right? But also this 6 weeks is 42 days, and player number 42, Jackie Robinson, played his career with the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's also why this will be relevant. If there is a Game 7, there could be something more that will point back to Jackie Robinson, and if so, it will be a hint at Michelle Robinson, who will appoint Barack Obama as her vice president and then step down and make Barack Obama the president. By the way, what I really meant to say regarding the significance of the fire of the old courthouse next to the Dodger Stadium, it's communicating the upcoming constitutional crisis. All right, this video is about this diagram. This diagram is my personal notes. This is my note-taking method, if you will, for aligning or comprehending what God is doing with his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, specifically regarding Paul Simon. But on that note, none of God's prophetic signs can be properly understood without their connections and context with the other prophetic signs. Just like it's not really feasible to isolate passages within the Bible and understand what they are speaking about without their context, and the Bible is infinite. It's all interconnected. One can take an infinite number of pathways through the Bible. It's an interconnected web. Well, likewise is the case with God's big picture of signs. And so this diagram, like I'm saying, is an assembly of a lot of what is going on. But even this diagram does not contain nearly all of what the big picture is regarding Paul Simon. It's containing enough, though. It's a lot, and we're going to go through it. And we're going to touch on some things briefly that are explained in more detail in the must-watch other videos. But this video will be worthwhile to watch too, because you can see it all come together in a big picture diagram. It'll help make more sense of everything. But the wise person will recognize when the predictions come to pass that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel, including every Paul Simon video. On that note, I made a couple of videos explaining how it is that there are Paul Simon videos that do not predict October 30th, the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will die. Okay, and I'm not going to update them either. I think the trail leads to, I believe, March 25th or perhaps March 6th, where the trail for some of the signs end. But like I explained in those other videos, the reason why God does all of this is to communicate information and extremely important knowledge that everyone needs to know. It would be one thing if God were to tap someone on the shoulder and say, tell the world that such and such is going to happen on this or that date. But what would that provide? Essentially nothing other than proof that the God of the Bible is true, I suppose. But it wouldn't give us any information. It wouldn't do anything like God is actually doing with his big picture of science, which through these interconnected prophetic signs, like I say, none of the signs can be properly understood without their connections to the other signs. And it is through this that God is able to tell stories. And it is through these stories that God is communicating essential information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. And that is, if you will, my job, is to help explain what the stories are that God is telling. And therefore, through them, the information that one needs to know. So, and they're beautiful, by the way. The stories that God is telling through all of the interconnected signs regarding Paul Simon, for example, are beautiful. It's absolutely amazing. You will be amazed. But also, this video is predicting that Jimmy Carter will die on November 4th, 5 days after Paul Simon. It is predicting that President Trump will die exactly 9 weeks after the death of Paul Simon. And it is predicting that, this diagram here is predicting that the asteroid that will hit Earth and cause mega tsunamis on both coasts of the U.S., the eruption of Yellowstone volcano, and the collapse of the Hoover Dam will be on August 23rd, 2025, exactly 41 weeks after the death of Paul Simon. And I'll explain the relevance of that in a minute. Now, this date that Paul Simon is predicted to die is a Wednesday. And Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel's first album was Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. I do believe it's highly possible that Paul Simon will die at 3 a.m. on this Wednesday. And this was recognized a while ago, but this step in the trail of signs, this September 25th date, which was known ahead of time, confirmed this because this was the day that Eric Adams, the mayor of New York City, where Paul Simon is from, was indicted and his Gracie mansion was raided by government agents. They were looking for incriminating evidence of him and his partners in crime, if you will, or his aides. And that hinted at the family that lives in a mansion, the fictional Addams Family mansion, or Addams Family, that is about their lives in the mansion of the Addams Family. So that's why Gracie Mansion. But also, Paul Simon, his biggest solo album was Graceland, and the song Graceland is about his travel to the Graceland Mansion, which is what the Gracie Mansion hints at. The name of the mansion that the mayors of New York live in is Gracie Mansion. All right, and on the day that the feds raided the Gracie Mansion, Jimmy Kimmel and Prince Harry toured a haunted mansion in New York City. And also, this was the day that People.com published their exclusive interview with the granddaughter of the King of Rock about her completing her mother's memoir, which is about her mother's life and the Graceland Mansion. So all of these mansion signs. Okay, and Eric Adams was indicted on this date, September 25th. By the way, also, Elvis died in his mansion while he was reading a book written by Frank Adams. The name of the book, Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus. Okay? So that's quite interesting too, and that's prophetic. That's designed by God. Elvis's death in his mansion while he was reading a book by a man named Adams, and the connection to the Gracie Mansion and Eric Adams. All right? And so Paul Simon is associated with the number 5, first and foremost, because the number 5 in the Bible is symbolic of God's grace. And Paul Simon's album is Graceland, about his travel to the Graceland Mansion. Paul Simon's name in Hebrew gematria is equal to 500. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel made 5 albums together, and their 5th one won 5 Grammy Awards. Their prophetic reunion concert that attracted 500,000 people was exactly 500 months before the release of Paul Simon's last album, 7 Psalms. Okay, and so Paul Simon is associated with the number 5. There's more, but that's enough for now. And that's why Paul Simon is predicted to die 5 weeks after the indictment of Eric Adams in New York. The day before, Paul Simon was in New York City doing a private concert. And we knew that God was pointing to that date as well ahead of time. But it wasn't learned until the date that he had performed a private concert on that date in New York City. Also, if I failed to mention, one of the characters of the Addams Family is Wednesday. That was the clue. The Addams Family is Halloween symbolism or theme of Halloween. Also, the granddaughter of Elvis starred and was praised for her performance in a movie named The Lodge, which is mansion symbolism, and also another movie that was inspired by The Shining that was premiered at the Overlook Film Festival that took place at the first annual one that took place at the Timberline Lodge, which is the hotel that is used for its exterior shots in the movie The Shining, and this is also mansion symbolism. Paul Simon connects to The Shining because the first lyric in the song Graceland is the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. Paul Simon dated Shelley Duvall for 3 years, and it is widely known that he broke up with her at the airport before she flew to the UK to film The Shining. The Shining in the movie is about demonic possession, And the fifth trumpet judgment in the book of Revelation is about a mass demonic possession. It'll be a mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, and the components that are in the thing that are now in people that are self-assembling will be triggered by 5G frequencies and trigger delta brain waves, which will facilitate the mass demonic possession. Which is why Paul Simon sang about the Mississippi Delta shining like a national guitar. G, the letter G is the seventh letter of the alphabet, hence 5G, frequencies. Music is frequencies. There's a phrase in the Bible that describes Satan as the prince of the power of the air. Music is frequencies in the air, as are 5G frequencies, which will trigger the mass demonic possession. This is the reason for the 5 connections here, the number 5 in these connections. And 5G, also the fifth trumpet, is the fifth of 7 trumpets, which is why Paul's recent album is named 7 Psalms. And he was instructed to make the album in a dream where an audible voice told him that he is now working on 7 Psalms. Paul Simon immediately recognized that he needs to obey this instruction because, as he says in the interviews, he has in the past produced music that wasn't from him. He said he was like a conduit of some sort. I forget the words that he uses. But, for example, his first hit just came through him, he says, which is the Sound of Silence, the big hit that launched his career. And this is why God is using Paul Simon. One big reason is that Paul Simon is symbolism for the sound of silence that was heard in heaven as recorded in the book of Revelation, chapter 8, verse 1. There was a brief period of silence in heaven that preceded the 7 trumpet judgments of destruction for America specifically, and that's in the text. I explained that in another video. That's a long explanation. I won't go into it. But some people are mistaken when they say that America is not in the Bible. It's clearly in the Bible, and I'll just give you a hint. It's the ships. The ships in Revelation chapter 8 are a symbol, a clue that points to the daughter of Tarshish, known for its ships, which is Isaiah chapter 23. Isaiah chapter 23 is about America. It is not about Tyre. Ancient Tyre is symbolism for America. I mean, there might be overlap. That's how prophecy works. There's secondary fulfillments. But God had Isaiah record the chapter 23 of Isaiah because it is about America. Well, anyway, I won't get off any more onto that subject. But that's the significance, the prophetic symbolism and significance of the timing of Paul Simon's death. In other words, the death of Paul Simon will be a massive prophetic sign that is communicating a brief period of calm before the judgment destruction of America. It is the beginning of the destruction. Likewise is the case with the death of Jimmy Carter. In God's signs, Jimmy Carter is symbolism for Methuselah, and this is explained in the Jimmy Carter videos. Methuselah, Noah's grandfather in the Bible, died at the time of the flood judgment. Methuselah means when he dies, destruction. That's what the name means. And so when Carter dies, which will be just 5 days after Paul Simon, it will communicate, like Paul Simon, the beginning of the judgment and destruction of America. Now, their deaths are predicted to be 5 days apart. Both of these men are old, and I can appreciate the skeptics saying, well, Jimmy Carter's 100 years old, he could die any day. That's true. But the reasons for how I know specifically November 4th prove that it isn't just a coincidence that I would be able to predict the date of his death. I'm not making a video for every day of the calendar year with contrived connections. These are clear connections that are logical and they're clear. And so it'll be irrational for the skeptic, but skeptics aren't necessarily rational. But besides all that, predicting both men's dates of their death 5 days apart, well, obviously that's no longer anywhere close to being a coincidence. All right, that would be shamefully irrational for a person to continue with their skepticism regarding the God of the Bible, the God of Israel. Okay, so now, let's see. Let's start with something that I haven't explained in any other video, which is this death of Christy McVie, a former member of Fleetwood Mac. Now, McVie is known for being the writer, the person behind the two biggest hits of Fleetwood Mac, Everywhere and Little Lies. That is because the lies are everywhere today. The Antichrist system is fully here, and it is currently spewing propaganda and lies nonstop. What happened was that for decades, the thing that Dwight Eisenhower, the president, warned of in his farewell speech is the military-industrial complex, but he also warned of the medical research complex, the scientific complex, and he warned of technocracy, which is where we are at today. And these intelligence agencies, over a long period of time, had developed and perfected what is called psychological warfare, fifth-generation warfare. They're in the business of managing, toppling, maintaining the regimes that they like or dislike around the world. And they do it through infiltration of media and propaganda, psychological warfare on the population of a particular country. But after the rise of Trump and Brexit in 2016, these agencies turned inward and focused their enormous skills on its own population. And in the process, did away with constitutional rights, including the First Amendment. And the left loves it. They are the ones that are responsible for the end of democracy. When they say that the right it's projection. Ironically, they even talk about the projection, and they call people on the right saying that about the left projection, but they are the ones that are projecting, and they're projecting their projection. They're projecting their projection. Okay? And so the globalists were threatened, and now we are in fifth-generation warfare. So this is more association with the number 5. Now, let's see. Paul Simon is predicted to die exactly 5 weeks, or 5 days before Jimmy Carter, but exactly 5 weeks after the indictment of Mayor Eric Adams. Okay. And that day is 5 + 1 days after this date, this baseball sign, in which the Japanese player that is dominating the league in an unprecedented way reached the milestone of 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in a season on this date. Paul Simon is known to be an avid baseball fan. He also on this date reached 51 stolen bases and 51 home runs. That hinted at adding 5 days and 5 + 1 days to these two dates. This is the date, September 24th, that Paul Simon had his private concert, and this is the date of the indictment of the mayor of New York City, which led to the raid of his Gracie mansion, which connects to Paul Simon also. Now, this player, this Japanese player, is he plays for Los Angeles, and God uses Los Angeles for symbolism for fallen angels. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash into a baseball stadium on November 27th as she is flying home to her $5 million mansion in Los Angeles next to the I-5 highway. Okay? And she will crash into a baseball stadium. And Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson in a baseball stadium shortly after the death of Joe DiMaggio, because one of the lyrics in the song is about Joe DiMaggio. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in center field of a baseball stadium. Joe DiMaggio was involved with an epic collision in center field that knocked him unconscious with a Hall of Famer named Goose Goslin. And that hints at the coming bird strike that will bring down Kamala Harris's plane. Now, this date was also known ahead of time, and one reason being is that it was 5 weeks and 5 days after this date. More fives. This was the date that the USA basketball team won a record, and God uses records, 5th gold medal, okay, for the USA basketball team. And in the sign, this game was Wembanyama. Wembanyama played for France, and he placed second and scored 26 points in the game, which hints at 226. And the 226th word in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word that means prophetic sign. In the tournament, he averaged 15.8 points per game, and that's why this sign was 158 days after this date, which I'll explain. But before I explain that, this sign was also exactly 5 times 5 times 5 days after this Wembanyama sign. This was the date of the eclipse that passed over America, but also Nike released its commercial, the first one for Wembanyama, who is nicknamed the Alien because he is 7'4" tall. And God is using 7'4" in his signs related to Paul Simon because it symbolizes the date America was born, July 4th. By the way, that's why Paul Simon will die exactly 7 times 4 days before Kamala Harris will die in the middle of the country, near where the two eclipses crossed over each other, incidentally, as well. Now, so the commercial that Nike released was his new logo, which is an alien head, and the commercial in a crop circle. The commercial is introducing Wembanyama's logo, which is a crop circle. He's called the Alien, by the way, because he's extraordinarily tall. And that's unusual for the NBA because normally when people are that tall, they're not good at basketball. They're not fast. But he is, and so that's why he's a star player. He's actually that tall and fast. Okay, so, but the reason for Wembanyama is because it hints at Paul Simon's new residency in Wimberley, Texas. Wembanyama plays for San Antonio, Texas, which is right near Wimberley. And so that's one reason we can know that these two people are connected in God's signs. What I forgot to mention is the Japanese player is symbolism for aliens too, because God is using Japan for 3 different reasons. One, nuclear weapons symbolism, but also land of the rising sun symbolism, and also mass demonic possession symbolism because of Japanese animation, which is obsessed with spiritual possession. It's rooted in the ancient Japanese religion of pagan spiritualist religion. And the reason for why the culture is obsessed with these nonsensical characters, it's all symbolism for demons. The cosplay that the women do, the young women, that's demonic. Which is why it's now popular in the West and America among young people and women. It's because America is becoming demonically possessed. Now, the other countries that never knew God are demonically influenced, like Japan and India and China. But as Jesus said, the person that was exorcised of the demon and then allows the demons to return and turns away from God will then be 7 times more possessed. The demon will return with 7 more of his friends, as Jesus said. And that's why, or what is happening to America right now. It's in the process of becoming 7 times more demonically possessed than any of the other nations that are demonically influenced. Okay, so, and again, that demonic possession will come through the number 5G frequencies, which is why Wembanyama is the 5 times 5 times 5 guy. Because it was on this date, let's see, where was it? Where Wembanyama, I think he became the, he might be the 5th person ever, or maybe the 2nd person ever, or maybe it was I forget. But he's one of a few people that have achieved what is called a 5 times 5 times 5 game, which is 5 assists, 5 or more assists, points, rebounds, whatever the statistics are in basketball. And I think there are 5 of them, 5 categories. And he got 5 in each one. They call it a 5 times 5 times 5 game. And, okay, and so that's when we started to realize that Wembanyama is important here. But it also connected to Paul Simon, and that's when we started to recognize the two coming together. Because this date here, March 6th, which was a date known ahead of time that God was pointing to regarding Paul Simon, was exactly 188 years, and God uses the number 188 frequently in his signs because H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance is the word that means woe, ! Used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. This was exactly 188 years after the 13-day siege of the Alamo, which is in San Antonio, which is where Wembanyama plays, near Wimberley. And Paul Simon, by the way, moved to Wimberley after selling his mansion in the 5th state, Connecticut. And that was a prophetic sign because it took 3.5 years to sell, and 3.5 years is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. It was also, it took a long time to sell, and at one point, or the first time the price was reduced, it was reduced to $11.9 million, and Revelation 9:11 is the passage that symbolizes the 5th trumpet that includes the mass demonic possession. And demons rising from the bottomless pit pretending to be aliens. They will pretend to be aliens, which is why we have Wembanyama, the alien, connecting to this. Because that's what the 5th trumpet is alluding to as well. All right. Now, so this date, March 6th, was 5 months and 5 days before this date when the USA won their 5th gold, which was 5 weeks and 5 days before this day, and on, as I just have now explained, okay? Now, the Wembanyama 5 times 5 times 5 game was also on the day that the famous owl in Central Park died when it flew into a building, which is what happened on 9/11. Paul Simon and Garfunkel's prophetic reunion concert in Central Park was exactly 9 months and 11 days, as in 9/11, after John Lennon was shot. And it is the SHOs that God is using in his signs as symbolism for the SHOs that people take. That is the mark of the Antichrist that will facilitate the mass demonic possession. Okay? The mass shootings, the things that come out of guns and go into people are symbolism for things that come out of things and go into people. That's why John Lennon was shot. Now, he is also a musician, and as I explained, music is frequencies in the air, and the phrase in the Bible that alludes to Satan is the prince of the power of the air. which is why 5G frequencies in the air that will trigger the mass demonic possession through delta brainwaves. Okay, now the reason, okay, so it is 2 times 2 times 3 days to this date, 223. But also, 223 is the 48th prime number, which alludes to the 48th president, Antichrist, who will occupy the White House mansion. Okay, now this owl, the Antichrist, Barack Obama, is known to be a night owl. The owl is first mentioned in the Bible in Leviticus 11:17, and the name Bama in Hebrew is the 1117th word in the concordance. Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. The name Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Barack means lightning. Bama means high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven. And the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, is the word for from. So Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. And we have the Bama word, which means high place, which is a metaphor for heaven. For example, Lucifer is said to have fallen from the high place. And in the Bible, the high place is a euphemism for the false religious worship that the Jews would conduct on the tops of mountains. Okay, so either Jesus didn't know what he was saying, or he knew that there would be a president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so anyway, the owl's name is Flacco, was Flacco. He was an owl that escaped from the Central Park Zoo. And then he was famous for having lived in the park for a number of months before he flew into a building. And anyway, there were bird watchers all over Central Park watching him and all that. So Flacco is the name of the owl, which is astounding because Flacco died exactly 5 + 5 + 5 days after player number 15, Joe Flacco, won the most improved player of the year, or the comeback player of the year in the NFL. He won the comeback player of the year in the NFL, which was awarded to him right before the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, Sin City, in the 36th state. And God uses the number 36 to symbolize the Antichrist, as 3 6s are hinted at with 36, and the number of the Antichrist is 666. But also the 36th triangular number is 666. And a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And also 36 is 6 times 6, and 2 times 18, which is 6 + 6 + 6. And 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. So the 36th state, Sin City, Joe Flacco, comeback of the year, because of the comeback of the Antichrist, the president that was the president and will be the president again, which is alluded to in the Revelation chapter 17 prophecy regarding the 6th and 8th king. The 8th king will have been, is not, and will be again. And Barack Obama was the president, is not the president, and will be the president again. The name Barack Obama is equal to 68 in simple English gematria, and that's because of the 6th and 8th kings in the prophecy that's being paralleled here. Because at the Jimmy Carter's funeral will be a massive prophetic sign with the former presidents lined up in chronological order. This will parallel the series of kings in the prophecy. The prophecy is about 7 kings, which is why Carter was inaugurated in 77. He began this series of 7 kings. The 7th one, Trump, was also inaugurated in a year that ended with 7, and on that day he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. And the 8th king was, is not, and will be again. And at the time of the funeral, when Obama sits next to Trump, he will be a was, is not, and will be again president. Okay. And so that's all amazing. So let's see what else. Now, Paul Simon originally tried to sell his mansion for $13 million. the America is symbolized by the number 13. And Paul Simon is symbolism for America. His song America and American Tune, which he sang the day before Carter's inauguration at the pre-inaugural ball, which is why Carter will die just shortly before the death of Jimmy Carter, one day before Halloween. Okay, and that's why we have this 13 days connection right here. But before we do that, let's go. Let's see. Let's do this first. So because we're talking about a lot of fives, we have the connection from the 5x5x5 game to this date, which, by the way, was musician signs, 70s musicians. This was the day of the news of the dismissal of the court case regarding the Eagles band leader who wrote the song Hotel California, which is mansion symbolism. And anyway, that's explained in the must-watch 51st State video, which it's one of the videos that doesn't have a date October 30th on it. It has a prior date in the Trail of Signs, which means nothing. You still need to watch that video. You need to watch all the Paul Simon videos because you should know by now how it works. They are steps in the Trail of Signs. And for example, I thought that Paul Simon would die on September 19th, but it was a step in the trail because God was pointing to that date, and it's not necessarily possible to know prior to the date whether it will be the end of the trail or the actual date of the event, in this case, the death of Paul Simon. This was the day also that the Doobie Brothers announced that they, all of the members of the former band, would produce their first album together in 44 years. And that was a definite sign because the 44th president is the Antichrist, who will return to the White House mansion, which is why we had this sign on the day of the Hotel California sign, which is mansion symbolism. And all of this connects to Paul Simon because he, like them, is a 70s baby boomer musician. Okay, and so this date was also exactly 5 weeks before the day that Paul Simon sang Graceland in the White House mansion. I'll expand that in case you can't read that. Okay, that date was April 10th. The White House mansion sits on 5 acres. It has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms. God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. From the very beginning, the White House mansion was designed by God to point to who the Antichrist would be, who would reside in it, the 44th president. It has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms. It's also located on 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue. By the way, it also is 55,000 square feet. Paul Simon, when he traveled to the Graceland mansion, would have been traveling down the I-55 highway. He speaks of traveling down the highway as one of the lyrics in the song. The mansion, by the way, the Graceland mansion is in the 4 times 4th state. It is in Memphis, Tennessee, because Memphis, Egypt, and the king of Egypt, the king of Rock's palace or mansion is symbolic of the king's palace in Egypt. In the Bible, the king of Egypt is symbolic of the Antichrist. Okay, so also the Graceland mansion is on 14 acres, and the number 14 is the 5th semi-prime number, which is why this date, 410. It was for a state dinner for the Prime Minister of Japan, and I've already explained the significance of Japan regarding the connection to 5G frequencies and mass demonic possession, for example, which is why the Prime Minister of Japan was a part of this sign. It was a state dinner. He was in the 5 acres mansion that has 55,000 square feet. The Prime Minister of Japan, 5G frequencies, 5th trumpet, mass demonic possession. The date 410 outside of the US, including in Japan, is 10-4, which hints at 14, which is the amount of acreage of the Graceland estate that Paul Simon traveled to. In turn, this 5 weeks connection is followed by, and this date that hints at the fifth semi-prime number is followed by exactly 5 plus 5 plus 5 weeks. 5 plus 5 plus 5 weeks to the 50-50 game involving the player from Japan. The Japanese state dinner connects to the player from Japan's achievement of 50-50 with 5 plus 5 plus 5 weeks. Also, by the way, it was realized this morning that Japan is 5 letters. And if we include Okinawa, which is valid, Japan is made up of 5 main islands. The reason why Okinawa is valid to add, because God has used it for prophetic signs. It is the largest of the South Pacific chain of islands. And there are 32 U.S. military bases on Okinawa. And the number 32 is equal to Obama in simple English gematria. Also, Okinawa is where the planes left to bomb Japan. And Obama hints at Obama. There will be dirty bombs that are predicted to explode in Manhattan on December 16th, and that will be part of the process of bringing the Antichrist into the White House in a moment of crisis. Okay, that's also why the prophetic Beirut Barak bombings, Okay. Now, again, the White House, the Graceland Mansion is on 14 acres, and that's why this, he sang Graceland to the Prime Minister of Japan on this date that hints at the number 14, and it was exactly 14 weeks after this mansion sign over here. But let's not go there just yet, actually. Let's just finish up a couple things here. Oh, you know what? I apologize. This isn't correct, what I said earlier. The 5 plus 5 plus 5 weeks connects to July 24th, not September 19th. That's confusing there. Okay. But July 24th was another musician sign. It was a date that was known ahead of time. First learned that it would be a date for Paul Simon ahead of time because of this connection right here. This date is 7/24, July 24th, exactly 630 months after Paul Simon released his album named Paul Simon, and that album contains the hit song Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard. Julio hints at July. That was confirmation for this a number of months. This is prophetic because this hints at 3 6s. 666, the number of the Antichrist. Okay, now what happened on this date? The sign we expected in advance was the release of the new trailer, the first trailer for the new Bob Dylan movie. Bob Dylan, like Paul Simon, was the pioneer of early 1970s, late 60s folk rock. They're the two folk rock legends, right? So that's why Bob Dylan was brought into the signs. Now, there's lots more to the Bob Dylan sign. That's explained in another video, another Paul Simon video. Okay. Now, Paul Simon is predicted to die exactly 14 weeks after this date, which is 3 months and 6 days, which hints at the 3 6s. But again, 14 is the 5th semi-prime number. Paul Simon is about the mansion symbolism in Graceland, which sits on 14 acres, but he's also associated with the number 5. And the White House mansion, where this is all leading to, is situated on 5 acres. But so from Paul Simon's death, it's 14 weeks back to this date, which is also exactly 140 days, which also hints at 14, which is also 9 plus 11 weeks, and this hints at Revelation 9:11 and the 5th trumpet, the mass demonic possession. This is 140 days exactly after this sign that I already explained on March 6th. And by the way, as I was saying, this was 188 years after the 13-day siege. That's another confirmation of this addition of 13 days. In fact, this date was known ahead of time because of this 13 days. And then it was realized that this would be the anniversary, the very prophetic 188th anniversary of the 13-day siege of the Alamo in San Antonio, which is where Wembanyama plays, which is near Wimberley, where Paul Simon is predicted to die. He's predicted to die in Wimberley. So that's why the 13 days is relevant right there too. All right? Okay, I think we can go there now. So this date here, this 13 days back, gets us to the 74,000 AT&T customers that were without power. This day was also known ahead of time, and it was known to be a very important date ahead of time, 2 years in advance, or at least a year and a half. And it was at least late December, I think, or maybe even early January, that this would be for Paul Simon, so February 22nd. But it was also known to be a date primarily for the sun. And the 74,000 power outage detected by downdetector.com, this is the number in the news, 74,000, was the result of coronal mass ejection. We know this because of the news of the sun on that day. The companies don't release the causes of their outages. Okay, they don't reveal that, but we know it was because of the solar flare that day, or this coronal mass ejection that hit that day. Okay, and we know that also because God was pointing to this date a year and a half in advance for such a thing. Now, the thing is that Paul Simon is symbolism for America, so is the number 13. The nation was founded on 13 colonies because America is the 13th tribe of Israel. The tribe of Joseph was divided into two, Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh was the younger of the two, the one that received the inheritance demonstrated by God in the Bible. And that's because America, the younger sibling of the Great Britain, received the inheritance. Okay, there's more to it, but America is God's nation. It is the 13th tribe. Okay, and so that's the reason there, because, and again, Paul Simon, America, American Tune, his songs, okay? Now, this date was known ahead of time because of this 40 years connection. Because this connects back to the day that the King of Rock's airplane, the Lisa Marie plane, flew from where it was being stored in Florida back to Graceland Mansion. It sits now at the Graceland estate and is one of the prime attractions that people visit while they're visiting the Graceland Mansion. They tour the plane. There's lots more to be said regarding the prophetic significance of the plane. It has, for example, a lightning bolt on it, and this symbolizes Barack Obama, as I explained. But this was a big homecoming. And Paul Simon has a song named Homeward Bound. This plane was homeward bound. There was big celebration in Memphis, Tennessee on this day. They shut down the highway to bring the plane through the city to the Graceland estate. And the mayor said that this was, or the king of the county or whatever said this is Graceland Day, or maybe it was the mayor, I think. Elvis Day, or no, Graceland Day. Anyway, it's the date 222, which is prophetic too, because Washington was born on the date 222. And the CVD disease on March 11, 2020, the official day it was declared, was exactly 222 months after 9/11. And in the autumn, November of 2019, before there was even such a thing in the news as the CVD disease, I was predicting that something very big and bad and world-changing would happen on March 11th, 2020, and I didn't know what it would be even until the date itself. I didn't even recognize that it was the thing, the CVD disease, until actually March 11th. But And I didn't say that about any other date in 2020. And the reason why I knew that was because of primarily the 222 months connection. Because through the 9/11 events, God pointed to George Washington, who was born on the date 222. Well, that's enough of that tangent, because I've explained it many other times in other videos. But 40 years, because the Graceland Mansion is in Memphis, Tennessee, which is named after Memphis, Egypt, in the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt. And in the Bible, the king of Egypt is symbolic of the Antichrist. And after the Israelites escaped the Antichrist, or the king of Egypt, they wandered the desert for 40 years. So that's why 40 years from this Graceland, and the King of Rock's mansion is symbolic of the king's palace in Egypt. So 40 years. And then that's got us to this date about America. And that's why the Little Egypt area of the country is right smack in the middle of the nation, which is actually also where the two eclipses crossed each other, which engendered an X, which in ancient Hebrew was the Tav letter, the last letter in the alphabet, the Tav letter, the 22nd letter, which is the reason for the 40 years connection with Antichrist symbolism between these two dates, 222. But also, we get the sun sign here. And by the way, Elvis recorded with Sun Records until Colonel Parker stole him from Sun Records, and that's why the current probe around the sun is named a Parker probe, because of Colonel Parker and Sun Records and the King of Rock, as in the Antichrist king and the king of Egypt. But the number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist would have been the Tav letter, the X, and that's the last and 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And so what's going to happen, though, is that the mark of the Antichrist will be enforced through the restriction of buying and selling food, which is why Elvis is known for overeating before he died. That's why. That's why he's known for overeating. It's because when the sun, as in Sun Records, sends off its coronal mass ejection that knocks out the power grid, food will be rationed to only the good citizens, the worthy citizens, the ones who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. The socialists, the ones that believe and worship the state and collectivism and doing the right thing for the collective, which always leads to the trampling of rights of the individual, which is what America was founded on, because this is the theme in the Bible. But now that we have lost the Bible and Christianity in America and the West, the inevitable vacuum is inevitably filled with communism. It's a law of the universe. It's how it works. The founders knew this. They knew that democracy could only be had by a moral, religious people. And literally, they knew that. They said that there's quotes from them regarding this. And now that America is no longer a Christian nation, it can no longer have, it's impossible, literally, absolutely impossible for America to maintain its democracy. The collective, the state begins to rule. It fills the void. And that's the CVD hysteria and the hysteria over climate change and all of the collectivist endeavors of the left, which are all a farce, but it gives them meaning in life. That's the thing about communism and socialism. It provides the meaning that they no longer have in their life, because they have no meaning in life because there's no afterlife. In other words, there is absolutely no meaning in life unless there's eternity, because everyone will die, and this supposed meaning in life through their children is a farce as well, because they will die, and eventually the sun will be too hot 900 million years from now, which is not a long time cosmologically, where their life will no longer be able to exist on the sun. If you even want to extrapolate, we'll colonize the universe. Well, even then, the universe has a lifespan. There's no meaning to life unless there's an eternity. And these people do not believe in eternity anymore. They're desperate. They need meaning to continue living. They create it, and inevitably they fill it with religious things. And the new religion for the atheist or the agnostic atheist is the state and collectivism. It gives them meaning, solidarity with each other. It's false, though, but that's why the wearing of the MASKs, because it signified in the cult, because all cults use clothing modification to signify to the others that they're a member of the cult, and that the others that aren't with the same program with the clothing modification aren't members. And so this was a signal to each other, hey, I'm a member of the tribe. I'm a member of the cult. It's a political cult. There are 4 types of cults, and one of them is political. This is a political cult, just like Nazism and communism, the Soviet Stalinist cult of the 1930s. Okay? And anyway, it's contrary to the theme of the Bible, which is this theme of a battle, a spiritual war between freedom and slavery. But these people don't understand this anymore. Anyway, so where were we here? We were talking about the 40 years connection to the Graceland. Okay, now this date that was symbolic of, the coming sun flare was exactly 50 days, and this was known ahead of time too, because this was known to be Paul Simon's association with the number 5, and the 50 days made this clear, obvious. Also, Paul Simon has his only solo hit, number 1 hit, was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which hints at 50 days. This date was known ahead of time too to be for Paul Simon. It hints at the number 13, hence the 13 days. Also, by the way, Paul Simon's 5th album that won 5 awards, Bridge Over Troubled Water, the last album with Garfunkel, won all of these awards at the 13th Grammy Awards. So this date was known like a year in advance too, because for Paul Simon, one reason being the 13th Grammy Awards. And then on this day, we had a mansion sign. Okay, this was the day of the prophetic mansion fire, the roof fire of the Miami Dolphins player. Now, the Dolphins is sun symbolism. It's the Sunshine State, but also Miami, the logo for the team is a sun, but not only is it a sun with the dolphin flying through it, but the sun has spikes coming off of it in the logo, which is a hint at the solar flare that's going to knock out the power, which is symbolized by the roof fire. Okay? Peter said the coming destruction would be symbolized by fire instead of water, which is why it'll be from the sun. Now, player number 13, so the date 13 is symbolism because it hints at the number 13, and also the Miami Dolphins are symbolized by the number 13. Because Barack Obama at the White House mansion hosted the 85 Bears, Chicago Bears football team. 85 hints at 8 plus 5 equals 13. But also the prophecy regarding the 8th king is a prophecy that's about the 5th through 8th kings. But anyway, he hosted the 85 Bears because that was the year that he moved to Chicago and began his communist activism in Chicago, because Barack Obama is a communist. And on that note, Barack Obama moved to Chicago that year because that was the year that the organization named May 19th Communist Organization disbanded. And he was a member of it. This May 19th Communist Organization was responsible for bombing the Capitol building in 1983. But when it disbanded in 85, Obama chose to move to Chicago, the hometown of his father, who he knew, Frank Marshall Davis, who began his communist activist career in Chicago before he moved to take over and lead the communist movement in Hawaii. which sucked in Obama's grandfather, who was an undercover CIA agent and assigned to Hawaii to monitor the communist movement. And that's how Frank Marshall Davis's path crossed paths with Obama's mother, who got pregnant and was seduced by Frank Marshall Davis at the age of 18. And this threatened Obama's grandfather's job with the CIA, and so he proceeded to hide the fact, the identity of the father, through bringing in Barack Obama Sr., a student from Kenya that was part of a CIA program to bring in students from Kenya to try to counter the communist movement in Kenya. Obama Sr. agreed to the lie, pretending to be the father, because he was promised that he would be allowed to stay in America and finish his doctorate before going back to Kenya. And this is why Obama's father and the mother never spent any time together. He was on another part of the country getting his doctorate. All right? But in order to make the story believable for the immigration authorities, they decided that it would be a good idea to have the birth in Kenya. So Barack Obama was actually born in Kenya, but Obama Sr. isn't his father. Well, anyway, back to the story I was telling before. Obama held the 85 Bears at the White House, and he said that this team was the greatest football team in history. But there's only one problem with that. Arguably, there's a case for it, but they lost one game in the season. And there is another team in history that didn't lose a game, won all of its games, and that team was the Miami Dolphins. And that year that they had a perfect season was 13 years before the 85 Bears. And in the Super Bowl for the Dolphins 13 years earlier, the MVP was player number 13. The only game that the 85 Bears lost was to the Miami Dolphins. And it was in week number 13. And the reason why they lost that game, they dominated every other game they played because of their revolutionary style of defense, which was overcome by the style of offense of the quick pass quarterback, Dan Marino, number 13. Wore jersey number 13. Okay, that's enough of that. So that's why it was astounding to have the Miami Dolphins involved with this mansion fire sign on the date 1/3, which hints at 13. Also on this day was the bombing, I think it was 1,300 feet. I could be wrong, but it was the bombing of near the gravesite of the general Soleimani, who is symbolism for the general in the book of Esther in the Bible who persecuted the Jews on the 13th days of the year, which is one reason why the number 13 is symbolic of the Antichrist. Also, Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Adam, and the two Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. Okay, well, anyway, this 50 days is preceded by 229 days, and 229 is the 50th prime number. That was confirmation for January 3rd, which was known, like I said, a year or more in advance. And one reason being, no, this wasn't one of the reasons, because this didn't get learned until later in 2023. Because this was the date, May 19th, 2023, that Barack Obama released his new album, 7 Psalms, which I explained earlier hints at the 7 trumpets, or judgment after the sound of silence in heaven. All right. Now, this 7 Psalms album was released exactly 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days after Paul Simon had his dream that instructed him to make the album. He tells all of the journalists in the interviews about the dream, and he gives the date of the dream, and he shows the picture that he had framed of the piece of paper, which he jotted down after having the dream about having to make 7 Psalms. 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days hints at the 44th president who will occupy the White House mansion. This date of this release of this album is exactly 4 times 4 months to this baseball game that I was mentioning earlier, which was known ahead of time. One reason being is this connection right here. This would be about Paul Simon. This baseball sign is about Paul Simon because, as I explained, Paul Simon is an avid baseball fan. And again, he sang in the center field of the baseball stadium and all of that. And also the connection with Japan. He sang for the state dinner for the Japanese prime minister, and this was the day of the Japanese player, as I explained. Okay, now, here's some amazing new things that I haven't explained yet in any video. Okay, so the day that Paul Simon sang for a private concert in New York City, September 24th, was exactly 32,200 days after player number 5, Joe DiMaggio. So Paul Simon sang about Joe DiMaggio in New York City in center field just after he died, as I explained. And he also had a private concert in New York City, and that was 32,200 days exactly after Joe DiMaggio's famous collision with Goose Goslin, which, as I explained, hints at the coming bird strike. But the reason for the 32,200 days is amazing, because Joe DiMaggio is known for his association with Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn Monroe was known for her death at an early age. And Joe DiMaggio is associated with her death because Joe DiMaggio arranged the funeral. It's widely known. Because I don't know the story why, well, anyway, he would have been a guy with a lot of money, and I don't know if any of the relatives of Marilyn Monroe would have been able to do such a funeral, but he organized the funeral, Joe DiMaggio, and he publicly bent over the coffin at the funeral and said to Marilyn Monroe 3 times that he loved her. And this is widely known. I mean, this is a known thing about Joe DiMaggio. So Joe DiMaggio, who, by the way, was the former husband of Marilyn Monroe, if you didn't know, he is associated with Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn Monroe is not only about her death, but also the 2 movies she starred in have a theme of immortality. Okay, and one of the movies is named Monkey Business, which is a comedy, and that alludes to the monkeypox and the coming thing that will promise immortality. And the coming begins the pan-endemic regarding monkeypox of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist because it has destroyed their immune systems, and that makes them susceptible to something like monkeypox, which they wouldn't have otherwise been susceptible to. This will be anyway what facilitates the pandemic, and this is described in Revelation 16 regarding the sores on the bodies of people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. That's what monkeypox is. Okay, now, so back to this theme of immortality. The first lie of the age was in the Garden of Eden by the serpent to Eve, saying to her that she surely would not die. Okay, and that is described. This immortality without God lie is mentioned in Genesis 3:22, which is why the 32,200 days between the the collision of Joe DiMaggio in center field in New York Stadium, Yankee Stadium, which is where Paul Simon sang, and the Paul Simon concert in New York City. It's amazing. 32,200 hints at Genesis 3:22. That's the reason for this connection. This July 1st date was the day that Paul Simon sold his mansion, which was a news story because it took 3.5 years to sell, and in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist is 3.5 years. Okay? And also on this date, though, this famous artist, musician, Nick Cave, released his album named 7 Psalms. I doubt Paul Simon knows that Nick Cave has an album named 7 Psalms. It's astounding beyond words. Are you kidding me? 7 Psalms connects with 322 days to 7 Psalms. That's this line right here represents the date that Paul Simon released 7 Psalms, and it was 322 days after Nick Cave and 7 Psalms. Now, there's lots more to Nick Cave, has to be explained in another video, because there's so many things to remember. I don't know it all off by heart yet. I just recorded all of the information as it came and moved on, as is always the case. Okay. But Nick Cave is very prophetic, and for one thing, it hits at the Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth of those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. The word Nicolaitan means ruling over the laity. Jesus forbid teachers. He said there was only one teacher, one shepherd, and that is Jesus. The writings of Peter and John and James also support this. And also other writings of Paul. There are, however, unfortunately, in the latter writings of Paul, for example, the book of Timothy, where Paul contradicts this. And so if you are a believer of the Bible being infallible, the inerrant word of God, well, you're going to have to figure out that. But the reason why Paul contradicted all of this in the end is he was getting frustrated with the churches, and he decided this would be a good idea to set it up like the way the Jews had set it up, with these leaders. But Jesus forbid these leaders. And he forbid preaching for money, another thing. By the way, the writings of Paul don't support the preaching for money. The passages that pastors use, they twist, take out of context. And in other words, they don't mention the verse that comes before it, for example. And it's all, if anything, a mention of getting food for those that are in need, that are traveling and preaching, but there's no preaching for money. Yet pastors make a career out of this today. It's a big industry. And that's why Jesus hates it and is coming to make war on it. But not only the preachers and pastors and priests and bishops and popes, but also the sycophant followers of these Nicolaitans. And now it is more dangerous than ever to be following a pastor. But actually, on that note, the first warning that Jesus gave to the disciples regarding the end is that there would be many that would come claiming to be Christ, and they would deceive many. Many would be deceived by these people claiming to be Christ. Well, the word Christ is Greek that means Messiah, which means anointed one. That's it. There are other anointed ones in the Bible that don't refer to Lord Jesus Christ. And so there have been very few people that have come claiming to be Lord Jesus Christ. And when they have come, they have been recognized to be in poor mental health. They haven't, in other words, led many people astray. Jesus was referring to people claiming to be anointed. Pastors, priests, reverends, etc. And the reason for that is because they institutionalize these errors that are by definition necessary for a denomination. There are 45,000 different denominations, and there shouldn't be any denominations. And the reason for it is that they all have a unique teaching that contradicts the teachings of Jesus, which is required by definition for a denomination. They have a unique way of interpreting or suppressing the teachings of Jesus, which is what facilitates a different denomination. Right? There wouldn't be 45,000 different denominations if there was no money institutionalizing these errors and passing down these errors to generation. There would be no Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, no Catholicism, if people just followed the Bible and did what John said, which is that you do not require a teacher, you have the Holy Spirit. Right? Okay, enough of that. If you are a Christian, well, not even. Arguably the most important video on this channel is the 23 church signs video, and also the must-read links that I will leave in the description box below this video. And when the prediction comes to pass, you should know that you should realize that the reason for this prediction from God is to prove what I have just said about the Nicolaitan doctrine and the Nicolaitans and who they are. Okay? And that is the purpose of the prediction that is from God. And believe me, I know far better than you the reason for the prediction that is from God, that is in this video. And the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. It is to prove what I have just said. Make no mistake. Okay? I could go on and on about the Nicolaitans, but I won't. That's another video. I've done it enough. But I had to because God brought in Nick Cave here. Nick Cave also hints at the Revelation chapter 6 when people will be hiding in caves. This is end time symbolism too. 7 Psalms. Okay. So anyway, this date is exactly 171 weeks after this date 322. So this date connects with the 2 7 Psalms albums and the sale of Paul Simon's mansion are connected with 322 days, and then this connects back with this connection to the date 322. Now, so 171 hints at the date 7-1. That's a confirmation right there. But also 171 is the 18th triangular number, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6, 18. Now, the reason is because, again, this lie will be promoted by the Antichrist, this lie of immortality, transhumanism technology without God through the thing will come from the Antichrist, promoted by the Antichrist. That's why the 666 in the number 171. But also, this date here, March 22nd, 322 in 2019, was the day that Jimmy Carter became the longest living president. The total immortality symbolism. It's just amazing beyond words. Jimmy Carter became the longest ever living president on the date 322. And by the way, this was exactly he was the 39th president, and this was exactly 39 years after the Georgia Guidestones were erected in Georgia, which is where Carter is from and where he will die. The Georgia Guidestones are a mocking of the 10 Commandments. That's explained more in another video. Okay, so there's this part of the diagram here. Now here's another part of the diagram that hasn't been explained yet. It's amazing because, again, the number 50 is associated with Paul Simon, 50 ways to leave your lover, for example. The number 5 associated with Paul Simon, his name equaling 500 in Hebrew gematria. This album, by the way, was released exactly 500 months after the prophetic reunion concert in Central Park that attracted 500,000 people. Okay, so we have this exact 50 years. Now, 50 years is extremely prophetic in the Bible and the book of Leviticus, and it symbolizes the church. And that's why we have this Nikon sign, because this Nikon sign hints at the Nicolaitan doctrine again, which I have already spent some time explaining, so I don't need to explain again. But what is this sign? This was the release of Paul Simon's hit song, Kodachrome. Okay? Mama, don't take my Kodachrome away, right? Now, the lyrics in the song in the chorus speak of the colors, how the colors of the Kodachrome are amazing, and the one color that Paul Simon mentions is the color green. He talks about the green colors of summer. Okay, I forget the lyrics now. But the word summer rhymes with colors, I think, is how it goes. Well, anyway, in the chorus, he also talks about, quote, take a photo. He says how he likes to, quote, take a photo, unquote. Take a photo is symbolic of the SHOT, the thing that is used to persecute Christians, and is what will be used to separate the sheep from the goats, the true Christians from the unfaithful Christians. Because taking the thing, the mark, the SHOT, is tantamount to denying Jesus. It's a spiritual abomination. And everyone knows that. because everyone knows that the thing industry uses for all of their things aborted cells from unborn babies. Okay? And maybe there's some people that still don't know that, but I doubt it. I, for example, spoke with a quote-unquote Christian once, and he told me that the reason why he took it was he thought he was doing the right thing because it was supposedly providing the begins with an im, ends with a unity for other people, etc., which is collectivism. Since when is healthcare about the health of the collective? This is a new thing. This is collectivism. And it was a lie. It was a lie from Satan. Well, anyway, and he knew, like the majority of the quote-unquote Christians that took it, he knew that the thing uses aborted cells from unborn babies, and took it anyway. And he thought that he was doing the right thing. And I asked him, well, do you really think that our God would compel you to do something evil in order to do something good? And he thought about it, and he was like, you know what, you're right. That doesn't make any sense at all. Okay, so anyway, Kodachrome, this is amazing. I think you got it now. The word Nikon is in the chorus. Paul Simon sings about his Nikon camera. It's a Nikon camera, Nicolaitan. God is using all these names of Nick in his signs for this purpose. And we're talking about an SHOT here. And the reason for the color green is because of the green horse, of the 4 horses in the book of Revelation. The green horse is associated with plague, as in begins with a pan, ends with a demic, and associated with famine, which will be the restriction of food for those who haven't taken the thing because of the supposed plague. Okay? That's the reason for the green showing up there. There's more reasons why I know this. This isn't the only sign that is, this is what I mean, what I meant earlier at the beginning of the video regarding how God tells stories, and through them, he reveals all of this knowledge. It's through the accumulation of sign after sign after sign that we can put the pieces together and get what God is saying. Okay? Now, this Kodachrome sign, the release of the song, exactly 50 years before his release of the 7 Psalms album. By the way, that's amazing. Because it's the 7 Psalms in the book of Revelation is also, right? 50 years exactly? Wow. And 50 years symbolizes the church, and we have the Nikon in all of this too. Okay. So this was exactly 140 months after the prophetic reunion concert. And what I should have done right here is drawn a line right here between these two lines, which says 500 months. The 500 months, in other words, is broken down into 140 months and 50 years. Let's see. Okay, and the concert, the reunion concert, attracted 500,000 people. Okay, and again, it was 9 months and 11 days after, I don't know if I mentioned it in this video. I don't think so, maybe. So anyway, it was 9 months and 11 days after John Lennon was SHO'd in front of the Dakota building in Central Park, next to Central Park. Okay, so 9 months and 11 days. Central Park is in Manhattan, the location of the 9/11 events. All right? Now, it's exactly 9 months and 11 days between these two Central Park, Manhattan prophetic signs. They're both involving musicians. And musicians, or rather music, is frequencies in the air. And Ephesians 2:2 tells us that Satan is the prince of the power of the air. which is why 5G frequencies and 500,000 people connected with exactly 500 months to the Seven Psalms album. But that's all relevant too because of the SHOT. Because the 5G frequencies will trigger mass demonic possession on those who have taken the SHOT, the thing. Now, the Dakota building is involved in all of this because it is symbolism for mansion. And so is Paul Simon. Exactly 9 months and 11 days later. The big thing about the shooting of John Lennon, of course, is how he died outside of his building, the Dakota building, a historic building. This is mansion theme symbolism. There's some numbers involved with that. I believe, first it was the address is 172nd Street, and 72 is 66 plus 6, which hints at the Antichrist, but it is also 2 times 6 times 6, and the first of the two Antichrists is the 266th Pope. Okay? Now, there's more, I forget, but that's explained in another video anyway. And but the thing too about John Lennon is this is all pointing to the first ever, and God uses firsts for his signs, psychedelic song. The first ever psychedelic song that brought the underground beat poet culture, the consciousness revolution to the masses, was John Lennon's song, Tomorrow Never Knows. And that song begins with the lyric, let me see, I forget. Let me just get it. Turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. It is not dying. It is not dying. Lay down all thoughts, surrender to the void. It is shining. It is shining. Okay. So now this is all coming full circle here. This is such a wow moment here. Because the first lyric again in Paul Simon's song is the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. Delta brainwaves will trigger the mass demonic possession, which is hinted at with The Shining. And that's all related to the movie The Shining, which is also mentioned symbolism, as is the Dakota building and John Lennon. But John Lennon's song begins with shining. It is shining. It is shining. But also he talks about it is not dying. It is not dying. This is immortality symbolism. Because the big lie at the end of the age is thou shalt not die and one will be immortal without God. This quest for immortality that is underway with the transhumanism technology, for example. But as the Bible says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, we get the deception we ask for. The aliens are coming because the vast majority of people on earth today believe in the possibility of aliens, including the majority of quote-unquote Christians. But that's a contradiction with the Bible because God became a man and died for the sins of man, and he didn't hopscotch around the universe becoming aliens and dying for the sins of aliens on other planets also. So, but the fact that people believe in aliens is why they'll come, and the fact that they believe that it might be possible in the future with the technology to have the first immortal man without God, well, that's bringing in the lie and deception of this promise of immortality that will be demonic. And that's why John Lennon's song connects with Paul Simon and Shining. And that's why John Lennon was SHOT'd 9 months and 11 days before Paul Simon was in Central Park with the reunion concert. Because of Revelation 9:11 regarding the mass demonic possession through the shining. Okay, and it's all coming together, a climax of New Age religion promoted by demons pretending to be aliens, that will merge with Catholicism, with its focus within the Jesuit order of mysticism and mystical experiences, converging with the satanic Pentecostal charismatic movement within Christianity. That all comes together at the end here. There will be this emphasis on spiritual experience and enlightenment and the next stage in the promise from God that supposedly has been repressed. It's all this way of thinking, yoga, meditation, etc., all coming together with the coming demonic deception that will include demons pretending to be aliens who will claim to be supposedly more enlightened and spiritually than us, and therefore we need to evolve our spirits as the thinking goes. Okay, which is the opposite of the truth, which is that man is fallen and his nature innately is corrupt and sinful and needs forgiveness. The opposite of we need to remember all along that we are God and forget the negativity and the criticism. That's what's keeping us down. It's funny how the two things are the complete opposite. The famous New Ager, former atheist neurosurgeon who had a near-death experience came back and is telling the world, including on Oprah, became famous because of all of this, says that the two messages that the female angel told him, which is the same thing in all of the New Ager experiences, near-death experiences, the demons come pretending to be a female angel, which is a red flag. There's no such thing. Angels don't reproduce in the Bible. And they always have the same message, but Eben Alexander breaks it down into two main messages. One, we have nothing to fear. Death is just a process of transitioning into the next stage, and we can do no wrong. Because everything we don't get supposedly right, this time we will get right in a future life. It's all part of the process. It's a learning classroom. So we can do no wrong, and we have nothing to fear. It just so happens that these are the exact opposite message, two messages of Christianity, which is that you can do wrong, you are a sinner, and you have done wrong, and you need forgiveness, and you need to repent because you are sorry and no longer do these bad things. And you have everything to fear because you are going to hell. You belong to Satan unless you escape this world through the ransom that has already been paid for your debt that is owed. You owe a debt to Satan. He has complete control over this world. He is the ruler. No, I take that back. He is the ruler of this world, though. And people are in bondage to sin and Satan. And the only way to escape that grip that he has on people is through the debt, the ransom that has been paid through Jesus Christ's defeat of death. Jesus conquered death, and we can now, because of Jesus being the first man, and the debt had to be paid by a man, which is why God became a man, but the man has paid the debt, the mortal, finite man has paid the debt and has become immortal, and we can also follow Jesus in this process of becoming immortal if we adopt and have Jesus' Spirit dwelling in us that will transform us into the immortal Jesus, like Jesus. And that comes from having a relationship with Jesus, and that comes through repenting and being sorry for your sin. It's like you wouldn't have a relationship with a wife if you did things she didn't like and cheated on her, for example. Well, why would you do that with your Creator? You have to have a genuine relationship. Okay, that's the gospel. That's important. I shouldn't just say okay, but we need to finish the video here. And people have heard this before, especially if they are a Westerner. And so hopefully that helps anyway. And that's what's going on here. And let's continue and finish this diagram. There's one other thing that hasn't been mentioned before in any of the other videos too. And that's this. The death of Christy McVie, a former member of Fleetwood Mac, okay? She died, okay, so she collaborated with Paul Simon. For example, one of the albums she was working on was delayed because she worked with Paul Simon with him on one of his albums. Well, again, she was responsible for the two famous songs of Fleetwood Mac, Little Lies and Everywhere. That's because the lies are everywhere. And I believe I got off onto the tangent before I finished that. Well, anyway, God pairs 9 and 23 together. 23 is the 9th prime number. But that's because the Antichrist was inaugurated in 09 and was the basketball president who wore 23. And the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's 23 chromosomes, 23 pairs of them. Anyway, Fleetwood Mac, there's more to the story here, but Mac hints at Bluetooth. And to cut a long story short, President Trump will die from a heart attack through a directed energy weapon and Bluetooth technology. And when Obama sits next to President Trump at Jimmy Carter's funeral, he will obtain Trump's MAC address, Bluetooth MAC address, which is why Fleetwood Mac. Christy hints at Christ, okay? And this is a frequent connection, a way of rather developing God's big picture of signs. 23 months followed by 9 weeks is classic. That's why it's exactly 23 months from the death of Christy McVie to the death of Paul Simon, and then exactly 9 weeks to the death of President Trump through Bluetooth MAC technology. There's also a direct connection. It is 763 days, which is the 230th semi-prime number. Okay? Oh, the album that Christy McVie worked with Simon on is Hearts and Bones. I'm glad I wrote this in the diagram because I forgot. That hints at blood. Bones is what produces blood, of course. The blood is produced inside the bones of people, and hearts pump the blood, and it is the mark of the Antichrist that gives people blood disease, and it is what the components of the thing that are in the blood that will provide the MAC address. And what is being done to Trump is just a prelude to what will be done to everyone. That's one of the reasons for what God is using Trump for. In that sense, he's like a Christ, but don't get me wrong. He isn't the type of for Christ. But Christ led the way, and Trump is kind of, if you will, God's trumpet that he's leading the way with. The indictments, the going to jail, all that is coming for the masses. And so is the Bluetooth technology and the 5G frequencies. All right, let's see. This is explained in other videos. I'm not going to explain it again. Brooks Robinson, player number 5, died on this day. He played 23 years in Baltimore, which is 2 times 3 months exactly to the 2 times 3 death of the Baltimore Bridge. The bridge is symbolism for the bridge that the demons will cross over into the earthly realm in Revelation chapter 5. Hence the player number 5. And that's in turn exactly 2 times 3 months to the mansion signs here and Paul Simon, who is associated with the number 5. Okay. Now, 41 weeks because Paul Simon is symbolism for bridge over troubled water. Ansel Adams, as in Adams, the mayor of New York City, and the book that Elvis was reading in his Graceland mansion when he died by Frank Adams. Ansel Adams is the famous Western photographer who took the photo, one of his most famous photos, of the Hoover Dam and over the Colorado River in 1941, the year that Paul Simon was born. And Paul Simon will die exactly 41 weeks before it is predicted that the Hoover Dam will collapse because of the asteroid hit that will also cause mega tsunamis on each coast and the eruption of Yellowstone volcano. More will be said about that in coming videos. This 14 is also a hint at 14, 41 is a hint at 14, which connects with these 14s right here. Okay? Now, this 140 days and 14 weeks is also, I forgot to mention, exactly 2 times 17 weeks. That hints at the 17th day of the second month, which is the date it is said in the Bible that the flood judgment began. And that's why we have this 2 times 17 days right here. Shelley Duvall, who starred in The Shining, and Paul Simon dated Shelley Duvall and is known for breaking up with her at the airport, as in the portals that the demons will cross over through, before she flew to the UK to film The Shining. The Shining is about demonic possession, the haunted hotel, which is mansion symbolism. They dated in 76, which is why the 76 days between the mansion signs here and the death of Shelley Duvall. And how they met is a famous story. Paul Simon and Shelley Duvall met on the movie set of the movie that was filmed in 1976, Annie Hall, Woody Allen's most famous movie. And Annie Hall name is a hint at it's more mansion symbolism theme. Furthermore, in The Shining, there was a ballroom hall. She died on the date 7/11, which hints at the verse in Genesis 7/11 when the flood began, which is why she died on the date 7/11. And by the way, in the movie, there's a flood of blood in the hotel, but she died on date 7/11, exactly 7 times 11 days before the mansion was raided, Gracie Mansion, and the mansion signs. And this is in turn 2 times 17 days because in Genesis 7/11, the flood began on the 17th day of the second month, before the date that Paul Simon will die, which will symbolize the beginning of judgment, just like Genesis 7/11 does. As I explained, he is the sound of silence, which symbolizes the beginning of the judgment. Okay, and so 76 days to this, and then 5 weeks from the from the indictment of Eric Adams. Okay. So Eric Adams was indicted on this day, and then his mansion was raided on the 26th. Okay, and the mansion signs on the 26th. Another thing up here, 17 months and 11 days, which since that's Revelation 17:11, which is this prophecy that points to the 8th king and Barack Obama. That gets us back to the day of the release of the 7 Psalms album. So that's amazing because, again, Paul Simon connects with 5 days to the death of Jimmy Carter, who is being used in this parallel with 7 Kings. He was inaugurated in 77, as I explained. All right. And let's see. The day that Paul Simon is predicted to die will be 203 days, which is the 23rd super semi-prime number. And 203 also hints at 23. And Barack Obama's number is 23, and he will reside in the White House mansion. And this was the connection back to the day that Paul Simon sang in the White House mansion. But also, he sang Graceland, and the Graceland mansion has 23 rooms. All right, now I think I've covered everything. I forgot to mention Raul Julia, the actor that played the father in the Addams Family. That connects with the me and Julio connection. It confirms that. And that's part of the Halloween theme. Paul Simon will die the day before Halloween. There's more to the Raul Julia, though, because of the other movies he starred in, including Moon Over Paragon, which is about, okay, so Julia died near Manhattan on Long Island, and the movie Jaws takes place on Long Island, and Richard Dreyfuss stars with Julia in the movie Moon over Paragon, and Moon is a giveaway that this is a prophetic sign. And I'm trying to remember all the details here, but the plot of the movie, though, is about the death of the president and the replacement through an imposter who looked like the original president. And it's all behind the scenes, orchestrated by the bad guy in the movie. And so this is all a parallel with what's happening. What will happen is that there will be a replacement of the president, which will make the death of Kamala Harris. I'm trying to remember how the character died in the movie. But anyway, Kamala Harris's death will be how the imposter comes back and replaces her and becomes the president again. But it's all corrupt. It's all corruption is the point of the plot of that movie too. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure there's more. I think, okay, so Jaws was released in the year that Carter was inaugurated. And there's more. I got to make a separate video about all of that, though. Okay, there's lots to that. Obviously, you can get the idea that it's amazing, and I don't remember it all, and I should make another video explaining it all anyway. Okay, so I think I've explained everything here. I'll just get the diagram zoomed out again so you can see it all one last time. I don't know. So when the prediction comes to pass, be warned that Ezekiel 3:33 says that the watchman that does nothing and not warn the people will be guilty of their sin. And also Jesus said to Christians that the person that does nothing with their bag of gold will be banished to hell. And contrary to what the Nicolaitans say about once saved, always saved. And so this is, and by the way, on that note, people are not banished to hell for eternity. There is the second death, and there will be a second chance also for many people, especially those that never really had a chance to have the gospel. Be warned, though, if you are a Westerner, the odds of you getting a second chance are a lot lower than somewhere in for example, Thailand. Okay? In general. And anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, this prediction is an evangelical tool like no other. That's the biggest understatement. This is a massive bag of gold. This is the biggest thing you can think of to prove the God of the Bible. All right? Make sure that you don't ever stop sharing this video. I mean, put the link in the video in the description box with something that makes people want to click it everywhere, including places you never go and visit, right? That's what you need to do. That's my advice. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.